Yeah, yeah. Yes, sir. Everybody clap your hands. Oh, yeah, yeah. One more round, one more round. Come on. Everybody clap your hands. Yes, sir. Feels mighty good in the room. Come on, let's sing this song together. I feel like praising him.
I feel like praising him.
I feel like praising.
I feel like praising him.
Oh, the Lord has been so
good to me.
I feel like praising.
I feel like praising him.
I feel like praising.
I feel like praising him.
Oh,
I feel like praising him.
oh,
The Lord has been so
good to me.
good to me.
I feel like praising.
Praising him.
One more time, I feel like praising.
I
Yeah.
feel like praising
Hey,
him.
that's what I came to do in the very,
I feel like praising him.
Oh, the Lord has been so.
Good to me.
I feel like praising.
I feel like praising
Right here, everybody clap your hands in the room one time. Yes, sir. That's what I'm gonna do. I don't care what you got going on in your life right now. Let's lay aside every weight and the sin, and let's give him glory together. Come on. I feel like praise.
I feel like praising him.
Oh,
I feel like praising him.
oh,
The Lord has been so
good to me.
good to me.
That's why I pray.
I feel like praising
One more time, break it up. Everybody lift your voice, come on.
I feel like praising him. I feel like praising him.
Oh,
The Lord has been so
good to me.
good to me.
That's why I praise him.
I feel like praising him.
Come on, let's go right here and say, praise him, yeah. Praise him in the morning,
Praise him in the
praise
morning.
him in the noon.
In the noon.
I will praise,
Praise him.
praise him. I feel like
Praise him
praise.
when the sun goes down.
One more time, everybody lift it up, say, praise him.
Praise him. Praise him in the morning.
Praise him.
Praise him in the noon.
I'm gonna praise,
Praise him.
praise.
Praise him when the sun goes
I need you to type his name in the comments, say, Jesus, say,
Jesus. No other name
Good under heaven.
can save us.
What the name?
Jesus.
One name, one name.
Jesus.
No other name.
No other name I know.
One more time, lift it up in the room, sing Jesus.
Jesus. No other name I
Given night to heaven, but the name of Jesus, Jesus. No other name.
No other name I
Now right here, everybody put your hands together in the room one time. Come on, let's clap. That's what I come to do. When I think of his goodness and all he's done for me, I need you to open your mouth right here and say this. Hey, yes, I got it.
Yes, I got it.
Everlasting life.
Everlasting life.
Say, yes, I got it.
Yes, I got it.
Everlasting life.
Everlasting life.
Say, yes, I got it.
Yes, I got it. Everlasting
I
life.
said, yes, I got it.
Yes, I got
Say,
it.
everlasting life.
Everlasting life.
Say, everlasting life.
Everlasting life.
Say, everlasting life.
Everlasting life.
One day,
Everlasting life.
when I was lost, Jesus died upon the cross. And that's why I got the Holy Ghost, 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 in my hands, in my feet, in my mouth, all over me, all over. Holy Ghost, say power, 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 wonder working, wonder working, wonder working. So save it, walk right, live right, do right, give right, power, 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 power. I got to, power, power, power. need somebody, if you got power, to open your mouth and say, yes, I got it. Hey, I said power, power. Yes, I got power. Yes, I got power, power. Went to a meeting one night, was it right? Went to the altar, lift my hands, and I called on Jesus. Jesus, I called on Jesus. I called on Jesus. I called on Jesus, and he gave me power, upper room, power, upper room, power, upper room, power, upper room. On the day of Pentecost, when it was fully come, they were in one place, one accord. Suddenly, there came a sound from heaven like a rushing mighty wind. Fill the house, fill the house, fill the house, fill the house where they were sitting. Fill the house where they were. Hey! Can I tell you, those of you watching at home, the same power we feel in this room, it can meet you at your room. I dare you to open up and say, in Jesus' name. Come on, lift up your hands in the building and say, in Jesus' name. Whatever's on your back is now under your feet. Every yoke be destroyed. Every chain be broken because of the anointing that has the power. I got the Holy Ghost, Holy Ghost, Holy Ghost, Holy Ghost. I got the Holy Ghost, Holy Ghost in my hands, in my feet, in my mouth, in my hands, in my feet, in my belly. I got the power. Do you got it? Do you got it? Do you got it? Do you got it? You got the same power that Paul had, that Peter had, that James, John, Mark, Matthew, Luke, all the apostles, they had power. Jesus said, behold, I give you power. I give you power. I give greater works than these, greater works than these, greater works than these shall you do also in my name, in my name. Take my name, take my name, take my name, take my name everywhere. Yeah. It's all in the name of Jesus. We got to move on, but one more time. Jesus, 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 Mary, baby, Jesus, Jesus, Son of the living God, Son of the living God, Rose of Sharon, Lily of the Valley, bright morning star, Valadax, yes he is, Emmanuel, God with us, Prince of Peace, Yahweh, yes he is, God in the flesh, God in the flesh, God, mighty 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 God. In him dwells the fullness of the Godhead, bodily Jesus. Somebody clap your head. Hey, I got the power. Jesus, 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 not Buddha or Muhammad, not Allah or Krishna, but Jesus, 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 Jesus. The president can't do it, God can't do it, money can't do it, business can't do it, but it's all in the name, all in the name, all in the name, it's all in the name. I got power, calling on the name Jesus, Jesus. One more round, one more round. Come on. Everybody clap your hands. Yes, sir. Feels mighty good in the room. Come on, let's sing this song together. I feel like praising him.
I feel like praising him.
I feel like praising.
I feel like praising him.
Oh, the Lord has been so
Good to me.
I feel like
I feel like praising him.
I feel like praise.
All right, good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. God bless you this evening. I pray God's richest blessings upon you, and I pray that you are doing well and are enjoying the favor of our strong and our awesome and wonderful God. As I greet all of you this evening, those that are on our Zoom platform, those that are joining us on social media, those that are on YouTube, those that are on our website, thank you so much for coming and being a part of our wonderful village time together. And as we continue what we started this month in talking about trauma and how we recover from it, how we heal, how we move on from it. I remember our last session with Director Lakeisha Uri, and she suggested that one of the ways that we respond to trauma and what we do about trauma is to try exercising. And she said, get help, regulate yourself, exercise, therapy, find your support systems and groups and all of that stuff. And she also recommended a book in which I'm reading now in preparation for Sunday, a book entitled The Body Keeps the Score. The Body Keeps the Score. So I'm digging into this, learning all that I can about trauma so that I can appropriately preach about it and share with you, of course, on Sunday morning. So thank you all so much for joining us. Just real quick, next Wednesday, 1 week from today, we will have one experience. It will not be at night. It will be at noontime. Noonday worship next Wednesday at 12 noon. Of course, it will be streamed live, but this is in person. More importantly, it is our first noonday worship since COVID-19, our first noonday worship. And we've chosen Ash Wednesday as that day that we have our first noonday worship in 3.5 years. And so we will administer the ashes. I will administer the ashes on Ash Wednesday. And so I'm encouraging you to get the word out, to share the word with everybody. Yesterday, I was at a senior building community event on yesterday for Valentine's. Well, the police department, we rolled out the red carpet and fire department for some of our seniors on Valentine's Day. And several, at least 2 or 3 came up to me and said, Pastor, I know you're back in person. You're back on Sundays. Yes, ma'am. We take it for granted that people think we're back. And what about Wednesday? I said, well, this coming Wednesday is going to be our first Wednesday. And they said, well, I can't wait to get there at 12 noon for Ash Wednesday. Also, College Sunday is this Sunday. Wear your favorite college paraphernalia, your favorite college gear on this coming Sunday. Again, poor frog that don't toot his own horn or blow or whatever they do in their own pond. But my daughter's going to decide where she's going to school this weekend. And so I have sweaters for everywhere she can think about going. And so I'll put one on Sunday, and then that's going to be it. And so I'm happy about that, but I'm more excited about being able to sow into the United Negro College Fund and to help college students all over the state of New Jersey. And so I'm hoping and praying that you will come and join us. And I'm hoping and praying that you will come and prepared to sow a seed for the United Negro College Fund, and hoping that we can come together, put together at least $20,000 so that we can be a blessing to the United Negro College Fund, because after all, mind is a terrible thing to waste. And then after all, we believe in meeting needs, and one of our core values at St. James is, of course, education. Well, let's pray, and then we're going to work tonight. I see that our facilitator and guest is here tonight, so let us pray. Our Father and our God, how we honor you and bless you and thank you for this wonderful day in which you've made. God, it's been a beautiful day in the state of New Jersey. Thank you for record temperatures in the month of February, well over 60 degrees for consecutive days. God, we thank you. We don't take it for granted, but we're grateful for each and every day that you bestowed upon us. And now, God, as we come tonight to glean, to learn, and to ascertain knowledge as it relates to trauma and how we heal and how we recover from it. Thank you for our facilitator, Sister Goodwin, tonight, that will come and lead us. I pray now, God, for attentive ears, so that every man or woman that has ears, let them hear on tonight. And God, we pray your blessings upon us. In Jesus' name we pray. And all of God's children said, thank God, and said, amen. All right, Sister Goodwin, can we bring her on with me tonight? For Hart Goodwin, who is actually a member of the St. James Village. And so we praise God for that. I was talking to a clergy person today, and they said they probably would tune in, and they wanted to connect with Sister Goodwin later on, because they're going through the same process, trying to get their license, trying to become a clinical social worker. And so they're going through school now. And because both of you all are in the same age bracket, I think it makes perfect sense what God is doing in both of your lives. And matter of fact, you're both Christian women. And so that makes a difference. And so I'm going to get out of the way tonight as you share with us, how do we recover? Tell us a little bit about trauma. How do we get over it? How do we move on? I know I'm preaching biblically, but you know the science of it. I don't know the science of it. You have to counsel people day in and day out that's recovering from trauma, so much so that she's completely booked. And so she may have appointments, but God has been good. So she's completely booked, and most persons in her practice that she practices in is booked as well. So let's thank God that she's carved out time to be with us tonight. And let's receive her tonight on Facebook, YouTube, on the website, and on Zoom as well. All right, I'll fade off. Sister Goodwin is in your hands.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's having a great evening, a blessed evening. I know this is part 2 about trauma. And so I saw the first video, and she gave a lot of information about trauma. So the good thing about it is, if you didn't see it, you were able to tune in, because usually, like me, I'm working usually these hours, so I get to log on YouTube, Facebook, wherever, to catch up on Bible study. But I did want to still tap in on trauma, so you guys know what it is. But I'm going to look at it in a bit of a different way. I'm going to talk about trauma and being like a Christian, and what that looks like, and things that we can do. But not just saying, okay, I'm gonna just pray and then everything will be fine, right? So trauma is it's an event or a circumstance where physical harm, emotional harm, or life-threatening harm can happen, and it affects you physically, emotionally. It can affect your spiritual well-being, and of course your mental health. So, for example, a lot of us, they'll say, especially in the African-American community, we have normalized some of the traumas and some of the day-to-day things that we see. For instance, for some kids, it may be like, oh yeah, all my friends have been jumped before. And so that has been something that they have normalized, when it can also be a really traumatic experience if you've been in a fight and a group of people just jumped you, right? Or something I see often happen with people where they've been robbed multiple of times. And it's almost like, well, it's where I live. That's the culture. Those are the things that go on. So, and sometimes we may see it and witness it, and we don't even know how to respond. because there's that freeze, flight, and fight situation where it's like, how do I help someone? Do I call 911? Oh, I'm just gonna mind my business, right? Because it's been normalized. And so kind of paying attention to even those little things that we don't even recognize, that we've normalized over the years. So there's different types of trauma. The main ones are acute trauma, chronic trauma, and complex trauma. Acute is trauma that happened one time. And some people don't think because something happened one time, it's a trauma. Oh, it only happened once. So that's not true. Okay. A trauma can happen one time and affect you your entire life. Right. Chronic trauma is something that repeatedly happens. So usually that's some type of abuse, right? I continue to get physically abused over and over. Sometimes it's emotional too, with the verbal abuse. And then there's complex trauma, which is exposure to varied and multiple events. So it's a bunch of different traumas that occur for you. Okay. No one trauma is not like, oh, I don't want you. I don't want you. I don't want you. Everyone can experience trauma, and you cannot tell someone that they did not experience trauma. Okay. So I may experience trauma and say, I had a really bad breakup. It was very traumatic for me. And you may say, girl, I've been in a bunch of relationships and it wasn't traumatic for me when I got broken up. We have two different lives. We experience things differently. And the way we feel, we can't tell other people how to feel, or that isn't a trauma, right? So don't ever let someone tell you, if you think that you've dealt with some trauma, say, no, you didn't deal with any trauma at all, okay? I want you, because you know the definition of trauma, I want you to think about, and you don't have to write in the chat, I just want you to think about if you have dealt with some trauma, right? If you're bold enough to put in the chat, you can, but I just want you to think about, have you dealt with some trauma, right? And it does not mean it has to be, oh, I've never had any abuse situations. Trauma can be anything that has affected you emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically. I want you to think about, have you dealt with trauma? And then I want you to think about, what did I do to help me deal with the trauma? All right. Because the majority of the times we don't do anything. And so I myself, as a therapist, I go to therapy because it was recommended at school that you guys should go to therapy, because you never know what could come up for you in one of your sessions that may affect you, things that trigger you. So I decided, fine, I'll finally go. I'm somebody's therapist. This was a couple of years back. I'm going to finally go, because I know I have some childhood trauma. And I went to therapy, and I'm so glad that I still go to therapy. I'm there every 2 weeks. So I will tell you that the therapist goes to therapy. Okay. So don't think for 1 second that we have it all figured out and we don't go to therapy. And I know I think we're getting better with the stigma of therapy is for crazy people. I think we're getting so much better with that. And I'm happy, because a lot of times people don't want to go, right? And I see so many Black men going to therapy now. I like my Black male clients. I'm like, yes. As soon as I get them, I love working with them because it just shows me, okay, we're breaking the stigma down more and more and more, right? And there's so many things that we experience in life that we may need therapy, right? I have had the pleasure of plenty of times things happen in the news with Black people, and I'm in a session and I have to show up with my client and help them deal with some of the trauma that they experienced just from what was on the news, right? And so I want you to think about that, because talking to someone that looks like us is helpful, right? But that may not always be the case. I know everybody wants a Black therapist, which is great. But out of the United States, there's only 3% of us, right? And that's very small, 3% in comparison to white clinicians, where it's about 71%, I believe. So it's very small, right? And it's being a therapist is a lot of work, right? But it's rewarding. For me, I know me, I'm like, I was called to do this. I just show up and let God do his thing, right? So it's a very small percentage. So yeah, sometimes I think we may get discouraged because we call places, they're booked, they don't accept our insurance. New Jersey Family Healthcare may not always have the resources that we need. And sometimes when you call therapy agencies, if they don't accept your insurance because you have New Jersey Healthcare, ask them if they have a sliding fee scale, okay? Because a lot of therapists do, where they will ask about your income information and see how much they would charge you, right? Because ethically, I couldn't charge you what I would normally charge a client, which may be from $125 to $150, right, with billing their insurance. Some Black therapists don't even accept insurance and will prefer that you pay out of pocket and they give you an invoice and you submit that to your insurance company, because sometimes, unfortunately, insurance companies don't want to pay us. Or it gives us they give us a very hard time, and it takes forever for us to get paid, right? So yes, at this time, everybody is promoting emotional and mental health, but they don't necessarily always want to pay, right? So I want to talk about, because there's many instances where trauma shows up, I want to talk about things that we can do as Christians. So one of the things I've actually learned from myself in therapy is scriptures, right? Scriptures help me a ton. When I feel like I am triggered, that's what helps me. Now, that may not be everybody's go-to. And that's why when you have coping skills, you don't just have one. You don't have one coping skill, because what may work today may not work tomorrow, where I'm triggered way more, right? So I use scriptures. I find scriptures that help me, that are pertain to my situation, whatever that may be. I will read scriptures. Prayer, right? Some people pray. Sometimes you can't pray, right? You don't have the strength to pray. You may write your prayers. I'm famous for writing my prayers. If I feel like I can't get that out myself, or asking someone who you feel is a safe space to pray for you, right? And you may want to go into detail. You may not want to go into detail, right? There's a number of things. Some people, when we cope, the idea is to kind of remove us from where we are and regulate ourselves, right? So you may want to read your Bible if you feel like, okay, I want to read my Bible. I want to, tap into that, and that may help me. You can do that, right? There's a number of things that you can do to help you cope as a Christian. Now, is that the only thing you want to do when you deal with trauma? Absolutely not. And you want to check in on how is your trauma affecting your daily life, okay? Some of us don't even realize that we may experience trauma that affects us daily. So I'll use, for example, if I've been in an abusive relationship for years and years and years, and I finally get out of it, right? I'm free. I think I've moved on. I'm healing on my own, right? I'm going to church. I'm doing all the things. I may be sitting at church, and let's say Pastor Slaughter comes up and he's standing above me. That may trigger me. And I may not even realize, my body may signal to me, I am not comfortable. I'm very uncomfortable. There's a little bit of a fear, but I may be fighting it because I'm like, but it's Pastor Slaughter. But because maybe I've been in an abusive relationship where this person was standing over me multiple times and attacking me, that may be a trigger for me. And I may not even recognize it, right? And so we want to pay attention to our body and what happens with our body. Is there fear? Does my heart start beating really fast? Right? If I hear loud noises like a door slam, I used to work with homeless veterans. And one of the veterans that I worked with was a Marine. And there was another veteran, he was there, I think he had been in the Navy, and he would play a lot. He was young. He would slam the door sometimes, but it would trigger my veteran that was a Marine, because he had been through so much. So that was a trigger for him, right? And his coping skill, and he didn't notice it at first, but then he realized, because he was getting really upset with God, he realized that's a trigger for me, right? But his coping skill was substance abuse. And we don't want to kind of have those coping skills. We want to have other things that we tend to. So I want you to start paying attention to your body and how you respond, how your body responds to people. Okay. A lot of times we deal with a lot of guilt with trauma because it's, oh, if I wouldn't have been there at this time, that wouldn't happen to me. If I would have stayed home, that wouldn't happen to me. And we take blame. I want you to pay attention to that too. Because these are all things that in therapy, you will work with your therapist on, okay? As a therapist, I know I'm biased. So I'm telling you, if there is some trauma there, you want to see a therapist, right? There's nothing wrong. There's Christian therapists out here. There are just therapists that are just here, and you can take your own things as the Christian and say, okay, I'm gonna try this coping skill, and your therapist is gonna meet you where you at. So even if your therapist doesn't identify that they're a Christian therapist, because some therapists keep their religion, out of everything. You can still use things and say, well, I know this is something that may help me. I may use scriptures, and they may say, okay, let's try it out, right? You want to go to therapy. Why do I want to go to therapy, right? If I know that God is doing his thing, he got me this far, why do I want to go to therapy? One of my favorite things when I work with someone who has trauma is narrative therapy. And that's just changing the way you think about the trauma. Now, a lot of people say, I don't want to be re-traumatized. Why would I go to therapy to be re-traumatized? And I always tell clients, when you come here and we do trauma work, it's going to get ugly some days, right? It's going to be days you say, Faja, I hate you. I don't know why you brung me to this point, but that's okay, right? There's going to be days that I make you bring up things that you didn't want to remember, or you push back. But little do you know, they've been coming up for you anyway when you triggered, right? And so my job is to have you tell me about what took place and how you deal with it, and what blame you may take, or what narrative you've taken on. Because sometimes our trauma has made us believe negative things about ourselves that we don't even recognize where they come from. We may believe those things and like, I'm just a bad person, right? It was my fault that this happened to me. So as a therapist, it's my job to hear what that narrative is that you've created, right? And because we want to change that narrative. A lot of things come up about trauma responses. And sometimes what that look like is people pleasing, right? A lot of us people please and don't even realize that sometimes that's a trauma response, right? I want to do everything right because I might have been in an abusive relationship. And if I didn't do everything right, I was going to get hit, right? There was going to be an argument. So my trauma response is that I'm constantly making sure I do everything right, and I'm pleasing everybody, right? I don't even realize I'm not even in this relationship anymore, but I'm trying to please everybody so I don't mess up, right? Because when I mess up, because that's what I do, I mess up, right? There's a narrative you sometimes take on. And so that's why when I do trauma therapy, I love doing narrative therapy. There's so many different things that someone can do, and there's not one size fits all. Right? The way I may treat one client for trauma is not the way I may treat another person for trauma at all. Okay. You go, and as a therapist, we meet you where you are. Are there going to be times that you show up to therapy and say, Faja, last session you had me do this, and I know you said we were going to continue on today with it as part 2. I don't want to do it. I'm going to say, okay. That's fine, right? Because I'm meeting you where you are. And I understand that sometimes it may be too much. That does not mean I'm going to forever let it go. I may bring it back up, but I am going to respect you and where you are, right? And so I want you guys to think about that. I also want you to think about, if you've been to therapy before and you're like, it didn't help me, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go back. Okay. I tell people all the time, therapy is like dating. So we may meet someone and we may see a therapist, and sometimes I'm really spirit led with a lot of stuff. So sometimes I'm just like, no, this is not right for me. And that's okay. I always tell clients too that your healing is not about me. Your healing is about you. So if I am not a good fit, you just say, Faja, I don't think that we are a good fit. And I say, okay, right? I work with a bunch of other therapists, and I will recommend you see someone else, right? I would never want you to continue to see me, continue to pay me as much as sessions cost, right? And you're not getting what you need. Right. I would not want that. And so when you feel like you need to change therapists, even if you don't feel comfortable telling the therapist, call the office and say, I think I need to change my therapist. There's nothing, for some reason we just aren't a good fit. And that is okay. Okay. You can always change your therapist. If you realize I went to therapy and I did some work, right? I might have lied and didn't tell my therapist everything I needed to tell them. You can always go back. Don't ever think that you can't return back to therapy, or that if you return back to therapy, it's a setback, okay? For a while, I was going to my therapist monthly, and I was kind of like graduating, right? Because we graduate you as you go along. I was going monthly and I felt really good, but then I got to a point I needed to go back to bi-weekly because monthly wasn't cutting it. And I'm like, I need to see you a lot more often. And that's okay too. And I want to normalize that, because I think sometimes we beat ourselves up and say, I got to go back to therapy, or, I was doing monthly and now I have to go to bi-weekly, or I was doing bi-weekly and I have to go weekly. You will determine with your therapist too, how often you need to go. Okay. When I talk about coping skills and coping strategies, it's very important to have those. And again, that's how we regulate ourselves. That's how we get ourselves back to where we were before, right? Where we're not maybe super anxious about something, where we're not experiencing fear. And so if you don't have any coping skills or any healthy coping skills, because sometimes we all have coping skills, but they may not be healthy, right? It may be, I'm feeling anxious, I'm gonna have a glass of wine. And it's every day you having a glass of wine. Let's try something different, right? We can try something different. And I always recommend at least three that may work. And you may have to go through many coping skills. You can look up coping skills online if you feel like, I don't even know what I would do, or what may be best for me, right? But there's a lot of coping skills. I give my students that I work with during the day that I counsel a 100 list of coping strategies. They're not going to do 100, obviously, but the goal is always for them to at least have 3. And what your coping skills look like at work and what your coping skills look like at home may be completely different, because I may not be able to watch Netflix at work if that's one of my coping skills, right? So I need you to find a replacement for that if it looks different at work. So find at least 3 coping skills. It could be going for a walk. It could be going to talk to a friend, and it may not even be about the situation. You may just want to talk to a friend to kind of move you away from the situation. If you want to talk to a friend, make sure it's one that's a safe space, right? Because sometimes I think we call people and they think we want advice, and it's okay. I tell my clients all the time, it's okay to tell someone, I just need you to listen. I don't need you to tell me anything. I just need you to hold a space. That's it. I'm not asking for advice. I'm not asking you to tell me what to do, when I should do it, how I should do it. Just allow me to talk, right? And sometimes that's helpful. Journaling is helpful. Find things that work for you, right? I've had clients tell me, yeah, my old therapist said I should go running. And I'd say, oh, and so how did that work? And they say, I don't even like to run. I would never recommend something for you to do if you don't even like doing it, or you don't even try to do it, right? So think about those things that you do that make you happy. that helps you, kind of changes everything for you. It could be like, for me, going to Target. It's just, I don't have to buy anything. It's just being in Target's store. I don't know. I like the lighting. I like the way it could be something just that simple, but I want you to find at least 3 coping skills that you can use. If one of those coping skills does not work, cross it out and add a new one. Okay. Don't count your coping skills out, because that is one of the things as a therapist we are going to recommend, because as your therapist, I can't go with you everywhere. But I want you to kind of pay attention to those things. I want you to see, what is popping up for me? What am I experiencing? Have I normalized some of these things? Does this happen on a daily that my heart is beating? And it could be something at work and you may not know, I don't know why I'm experiencing this. I want you to pay attention to those things and pay attention to your body. And if you feel like, okay, I think I may need to talk to someone, and therapy doesn't have to be a long-term thing. I also want to say that you don't have to go to therapy long-term. It is completely up to you and your therapist and where you are in your process. Okay. It is not something that is forever. It does not mean that I can't figure it out on my own. Something's wrong with me. It is not that at all. I tell everybody should actually go and see a therapist, actually, but sometimes resources we're not able to, and I completely understand. But I want you to start paying attention to if there are some severe things that are popping up for you in your daily life that you've kind of normalized, paying attention to that, right? As Black people in general, we deal with trauma, intergenerational trauma that has occurred over years and years and years. And one thing I think about is where I've had a client before who never had any issues with the police, but the automatic thought is if I do that, it's going to be worst case scenario, right? And that's just because I've witnessed it on the news or on social media, right? Not because I've experienced it myself, but because I know that I'm a Black male that is going to be driving. I may already have said that's a trauma that I'm already experiencing that I never experienced at all. So I want you to think about those traumas too, because some things we've experienced, some traumas have come up because of what family members have experienced or what we've seen in our communities. And so that's why when the news comes out and there's videos, I don't watch videos, but that's how I protect myself, right? I won't get on social media if something happened. That's how I protect myself. Pay attention to what you need. Sometimes we feel like, no, but I have to, so I'm aware. There's other ways to be aware and to find things out, but pay attention to what you need, okay? And pay attention to your body, because our body literally will tell us a lot that we need to know, right? And that's why a lot of times as therapists we'll say, go for walks, go outside, because there's a lot that your body, you may need to get moving. The air is just helpful to be outside. So I want you guys to start paying attention to your body, right? I want you to think about things that may be helpful to you as a Christian to cope. Right. I have some people, they sing, and that's all they need to do. They need to just sing and get it out. And they may sing their favorite song. And that's helpful. Pay attention to things that may be helpful to you. Right. But don't just leave it at that. Okay. Don't think you have to do it alone. That is why there are therapists. That is why God put therapists in the world. I'm so determined that is true, because I would have never thought in a million years that I was going to be a therapist. I was just going to be a social worker. But, called to do therapy. And so that is what I'm doing. And I always tell people, like, God shows up in my sessions. That's how I get through my sessions. So, there's a reason that there's therapists, and I want to make sure that you guys try to utilize those therapists on my website, which I'll put it in the chat, there are resources. So other therapists, they're Black therapists. I'm going to be adding on to those. And the good part about it is everybody, for the most part on here, I'm sure is from New Jersey. So most of them are from New Jersey, and they're Black therapists, and you can reach out to them. But do not be discouraged if you are on a waiting list. I also want to say that because sometimes I think we call places and there's a waiting list and we're like, nah, I don't want to do that. I'm going to be waiting forever. You'll be surprised how quick a waiting list can go. Because I know for me, I'm constantly, telling people, graduating people sometimes, and then filling spots. Or some people may need a break from therapy. So I immediately fill spots. So I don't want you to be discouraged by a waiting list. I've had people call where I work and they're on a waiting list and they're literally on it for like a week or two, if that. So don't be discouraged by a waiting list. Again, when you think about having a Black therapist, it's 3%. So you may not have a Black therapist. You may see another therapist, but you want to make sure they're culturally competent, right? That they understand you, that they're listening because you are the expert of your culture, not them. Okay. Like my therapist, I'll be completely transparent. She is white, but she is Christian. And she has showed up in my sessions where she has been like, no, that you're dealing with racism and we need to talk about how you address that. So having a culturally competent therapist, if they're not Black, is okay, but I want you guys also to pay attention to, okay, is this a good fit? She just telling me some textbook stuff and not really listening to me because you know what you need in sessions, okay? Let me go to the chat. I think I saw somebody said coloring. Coloring is one of the best coping skills. We have coloring books at the school I work at, and sometimes the kids just come in, they can have an anxiety attack. And our office is always full. They may just sit at the table and color. Sometimes I tell them they see me at the table. I'm like, you see me coloring? This is one of my coping skills. Coloring is the best thing ever. So don't kind of like knock that out. I see Therapy for Black Girls, which is a really great website too, because they have all therapists that are accepting people, and they're all Black therapists. And you can use Psychology Today as well. Again, on my website, and I'll put my website in here, there's also therapists, and I'll be adding on because more and more of us are opening up practices, which is exciting. I know where I work, we've added on new therapists, but I use the same agencies all the time when I refer people for therapy because I know of the work that they do. I would never recommend anybody I'm not really sure that they're going to do quality, right? But again, I also want you to remember that, okay, just because this therapist is not a fit doesn't mean that I don't need therapy or that all therapists are the same, okay? Any questions?
All right. Wow. That's a lot. I mean, that was loaded. And actually one of my coping skills, coping mechanisms is still writing. I know we have technology. My girls get on me all the time about using the note section of my iPhone. Just type, Daddy, type your stuff, and then you can print it. I still write everything. Sermons, anything you see that comes out from the church in terms of literature, or any email, I handwrite it, give it to Allison, and she types it. I still write everything from Bible study to sermons, because it is a coping mechanism for me. And I actually have, I don't know if people can see it, from writing so much, it's still, that's my writing finger. And it's actually the finger that you're not supposed to use, but it's what I use to write all the time. Everything I do, I write. And I found that to be like journaling for me. Mm-hmm. And it's coping for me. It eases me. I want to flesh some things out, especially about the coping skills. Mm-hmm. We talked about. If one doesn't work, try another one. Try another route. Like for me, what's working now is walking or the treadmill when it's cold, and exercising. And people think you oftentimes exercise, to try to stay fit, to look good, to try to impress people. But it's one of those coping skills. It's a moment where you just stay away from everything they got on the screen. And so what I'm going to field some questions if I see them in the chat. But I'm gonna be selfish since I got you. I always try to take advantage of a free session, although I go on Friday. Thank you for referring me to where I go, because
No problem.
I actually go twice a month. And I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna graduate. I think we still in 099 part. She's still trying. She said, "I'm peeling this onion back, boy. This is a big onion here."
Yeah.
But I'm gonna get to the bottom of it. So it's going. You said going to Target. So is going to the mall coping skills, even if you don't buy?
Yes, if that's a coping skill, like sometimes people may just like being around people or people watching.
I was going to ask you that. Okay.
A lot of people like people watching, and it's just, that may be therapeutic. Now, I'm not saying go to the mall and spend all your money, right? That may be an unhealthy coping skill. We want you to have healthy coping skills. So if the mall is somewhere where you just like to people watch or people around you, and you can walk, sometimes people just go to the mall to walk around. Correct. You can use that as a coping skill. If that's something that you feel like is going to help you, go for it.
And so I know from a theological perspective, it's not a sin to watch people, but I get joy out of watching people, whether they're enthusiastic, whether they're happy. Like this Valentine's Day, I was in the mall completely selfish. I had already done what I needed to do for my family. That was Monday, rather, in preparation for Valentine. And it was this rose store. I don't even know if I can pronounce the name of the rose store in the mall. What these roses last forever. And
the ones that come in the box.
In the box, right? Yes. And you know how you can go and buy a dozen of roses and they die by next week. Mm-hmm. These roses, live forever. So I'm intrigued as I'm walking by, Sister Goodwin, the line is literally down the mall, past Foot Locker and everything. And it's all men. And so I'm like, men gathering this time of day, white, black, Asian, all races. I said, so I jumped in line, because I was people watching. I said, I want to go ahead and see what this stuff is about. And then got in there and it started smelling. Then lo and behold, a member works there who I did not recognize because of the mask. And then she told me who her mother was, and her mother's now in the hospitality ministry. So she said, I need to do a selfie. They're not gonna believe Pastor was in here with me. So she takes a selfie. Then a gentleman walks by to my Dr. Slaughter. Dr. screaming my name like we on the streets of Newark. And so then I run to him, and then all the white men in the mall turning and looking at me like, what in the world? I'm watching them, and now they, like watching me. But I felt good in that place, and when I left out of there. And so when you say tonight, you don't have to buy anything. It's just doing something you want to do that just gives you joy. And it was hard to realize that is a coping skill. Should all clinicians have some general understanding training working with people with trauma? That's a question. So do you believe all clinicians should have some general understanding or training with working with people with trauma, or do you need to find a therapist that specializes in trauma?
So they may have general, right? Because you learn about trauma. They may have general knowledge, but that does not mean they do trauma work. So if you recognize that you need to do some work on some trauma, you need to get a therapist that is trauma focused. So you definitely want to, if you're looking at bios, kind of see what people are specializing in. Some people have, like me, I didn't think that trauma would be my thing, but I'm constantly in the training about trauma. I just did one last Monday, right? So you want to find those people that are doing the trauma work.
Okay. Now, here's a touchy piece because it really hits home. in our state of New Jersey, and it is something that is widespread around the country, and that is bullying. You kind of touched on it, how people, can be jumped and bullied. I think we witnessed with this young teenager that killed herself was a result of being jumped on. So maybe the parents who are listening tonight, what are some ways, because if their child witness fights or witness people getting jumped, or people, folk be telling all these jokes and mean and nasty, hurting people's feelings, what are some of the things we can do with our children or our teenagers that are experiencing trauma and don't even know it?
Okay, so that's like perfect, because I'm a school social worker, and the anti-bullying specialist at my school.
Awesome.
So I investigate bullying all the time. But one of the things you want to talk to your kids about is first being a upstander and not a bystander. That's something my principal says to our students all the time. Being an upstander, not a bystander. And that comes when I think about like them kids just normalizing, oh, well, that happens. Going to tell an adult, right? And going to speak to someone at the school if something bothers them. But as parents, you want to tell them to be an upstander, not a bystander, but also ask them, how did that make them feel? Do they feel like that could happen to them? Has there been any situations where they were afraid that was going to happen to them? Are there people at school bothering them or saying things to them? Because a lot of students have this mindset of no snitching. I work at middle school, so all the students go by no snitching. So a lot of times you want to let them know that if they feel they can talk to someone at school, because we have a way of saying things like, I would never come and say, Pastor Slaughter told me that you was teasing Sister Allison. I would never do that. Right. Because I'm so active in my school, I always tell them, my ear hits the hallways. So I hear a lot of things, and a lot of kids come to me about a lot of different things. And this is what I'm hearing, because I also want to protect the other students so they don't get any backlash for snitching. But, really talking to your kids and checking in with them. I always say checking in is very important. Checking in with their feelings. How's school? A lot of kids will say, oh, it's good. It's okay. It's fine. Okay. What was fine about school? What was good about school? Because those are normal answers that I could give you just to keep you quiet. Like, yeah, school was okay. Okay, what was okay with school? Tell me some good things. Tell me, I do with my students 2 ups, 1 down. Tell me 2 good things and 1 bad thing that may have occurred today. And kind of explore that if they are experiencing some trauma, because seeing someone get jumped, I'm sure it's scary. And then to find out later with that incident that someone, died by suicide is very traumatic. Right. When we experience things like that in our school district, we have to have a whole team come out, and we all have to be alert and ready for students that come in. So check in with your kids and see what they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis, and, encouraging them to go and talk to someone about what they're seeing or what they may be experiencing. And if it's something they've just seen and they, it's coming up for them a lot, you may want to put them in therapy. Again, therapy is not long-term. Or they may just want to check in with their school counselor or social worker if there's someone available to them or that they may feel comfortable with.
Absolutely. I oftentimes reflect back to childhood, and, we didn't know what to call it in the 80s, 70s. I'm a 75 baby. You didn't know what to call it in the 80s, and really didn't know what to call it in the 90s. When you heard trauma, they usually only relegated that to military, or police officers, seeing things, or paramedics or doctors, or we see trauma hospital signs, So we never relegated to something so deep mentally. And I remember, middle school, we would jump people. My neighborhood would jump. We, the Malibu boys, would jump somebody in Carver Shores. Would jump somebody in Richmond Heights. We'd kick their behind, jump them. And it was all fun until I got caught by myself one day. and the car patrol boys jumped me. And so I had to go home wearing a whooping, a pretty good one too, swollen eye, busted lip, I said, this thing ain't fun, so, and the bullying that took place, we didn't call it bullying then. I mean, so some of us, even from the 80s and 90s, don't even know that trauma has caught up with us, in a sense. And that's why I think Yuri said hypervigilance. That's why we, always watching our surroundings, like, oh, I don't trust them, or I don't trust you, I don't trust that. So some things our adults, our seasoned seniors from the 40s and 50s lived through the civil rights. That's trauma that they might not even be able to recognize why they need a therapist at 80 and 90 years old.
Right.
Because that trauma has been so deep rooted and untreated, for so long that it has become, I think you mentioned, generational, multi-generational. So I think we ought to start encouraging even our seniors to start, looking into getting treated for trauma. Somebody asked a question, what are your thoughts on telehealth versus in-person?
So I actually do telehealth. I hated it at first. I'll be completely honest. The pandemic kind of made me do it, but it's convenient. A lot of people are doing therapy. So I have clients that they live in New Jersey, but they don't live anywhere close to where our office is. And I don't think they plan on coming in person, because it wouldn't be like, wow, that's a long drive for an hour. So I think do what's best for you. I do have some clients I see in person, but that is based on circumstances, and I kind of explore that. But do what's best for you. You can always call an office and say, hey, do you offer in-person therapy if you feel like telehealth is just not best for you? So I always want, again, check in with you. This is about you. It's not about anybody else. So if they say, no, I don't do in person, then you want to make sure you find someone that does in person. But there's nothing wrong with telehealth at all. I don't think. You just want to make sure you have some privacy. I never do sessions with people if they're like with someone, because people skate around things they need to say, and I need you to be your authentic self and say everything. No matter how comfortable you think you are with someone. Okay. So check in and see what you think may be best for you. But telehealth, to me, there's nothing wrong with it. Okay.
Awesome. Now, moving on, you mentioned something about officers and law enforcement and witnessing this. And I think I preached it on the first Sunday when I talked about from trauma to triumph and dealing with Joseph. And that Blacks, when they see the siren, when they see the lights and hear the siren, they don't even know that's a trauma response. Those lights have triggered something because of what they have seen, as innocent as they might be. And so that's been really the crux of my work that Mayor Baraka has put me in with the Newark Police Department, is helping these officers to realize that you are policing, or whatever we call it, people that have traumatic experiences. So it ain't that they hate you, it's that what you represent sometimes causes them, it becomes a trigger. Now I got to put a plug in, which is why we're having new officers introduced to the community on this coming Tuesday night at the Donald Payne School at 6 o'clock, so that before the officers hit the street, before they hit the precincts, that they get the chance to meet the community, engage with the community gets to engage with them. And so we're going to have hundreds of people there to meet these new officers that all come from Newark. And that's the joy of policing. When they come from the community within, they police it different because, they're born and raised in it. So I think you hit a great point on that, because those triggers are real. Someone asked, can you ever be free from a traumatic experience? Or is it something that would always be there and you'll just get better at coping with it over time?
Usually it's something that usually is there and that you get better with dealing with over time. I think it really probably depends on what the trauma is, but to say you'll be completely over it may not be realistic, because what may trigger it one day may not another day. But time and time, years and years later, it may come up again, right? But you may learn how to deal with it differently. And that's why therapy, or how you even think about it, or how it's showing up in your life in other ways. That's why I think therapy is great. But it really, I think, really depends on what the trauma is. But for the most part, it's pretty much how you deal with it.
Okay. Next question. Do you try to identify coping mechanisms to deal with triggers related to past traumas?
Do I try to, as the therapist? I make suggestions, but again, what works for me doesn't work for everyone else. So like I said, with a client where they're saying, oh, the therapist said I should run. Running would be a great coping skill. But if you don't run and you're not, and I asked, like, did you run? Are you interested in running? And the client said, no. And for me, I try always not to badmouth another therapist, but I was like, then I'm not really sure why that was suggested to you, right? I will always ask my clients, what makes you happy? What is something you enjoy doing? What are your strengths? Because those are things that I can build on and suggest. And we'll come up with a few. I may suggest some. You may say, I like this. And I may say, okay, that's a healthy coping skill. Or you may tell me something. I may say, that's unhealthy. Let's try to figure that one out. But I will help you come up with coping skills, but it's about you. So I'm never going to tell you coping skills that I think, oh, you should do this. I'll definitely suggest some and you can try them. Because I've had clients, I say, oh, why don't you try this? No, I don't like that. Okay. Right. So I would do, what you think works for you. Because some clients, journaling is great. And I saw someone put journaling is great. It is. You know how many clients have said to me, no, I don't like journaling. I don't want to write. Okay. Right. I may think that's great. It doesn't work for you. Let's find out what works for you.
Yeah. Now, this is going to work its way and weave its way into Sunday's sermon, which is part 2 of From Trauma to Triumph. You said, and I'm going to give you credit tonight, I may give you some Sunday too, that when we cope, we remove ourselves from where we are. And that's some of the beauty of coping. But this is the first time I've ever heard, and this is where it's good to have a Christian clinician. I also got to deal with that 3%, but I'm gonna run out of time. I got to really dig into that. Only 3% clinicians.
Yeah.
God have mercy. But you said scriptures can help with trauma triggers. Are those like scriptures we memorize, or is that like devotional and just spending time reading the word?
So whatever works for you. So for me, scriptures work, right? I will go in, and my therapist has suggested this to me. Go in the Bible and find scriptures that are going to help you, right? So I have a Google Doc with scriptures for a number of different things that help me, from anxiety to scriptures I may use before a session, right? Find scriptures that help you, that help your situation, that you read. And when you read it, there's something that it touches you. This is one of your favorite scriptures. It really gets you going. It really makes you feel empowered, feel closer to God. Find the scriptures that work for you. My scriptures may not work for you. You have to find what works for you. So go and find scriptures that work best for you, right? That speak to you. You definitely want to go and do that. If that's something, again, that you want to do. I have clients, they want to sing. They just want to sing their favorite gospel song. And I love that, right? That's what helps them. And they find songs that help them. Some songs speak to you differently than others. But yes, scriptures, if you want to do a devotional, you can.
Okay.
I think whatever you feel is best.
Yeah. And so we're going to start moving out of here now. We are right at 2 minutes shy of 8 o'clock. I cannot leave, and I can't thank you enough, Sister Goodwin, for sharing with us so freely and openly and helping us. This is what I call, in my own colloquialism, the Bible coming to life, because we need to wrestle with these things. But this last thing, when you said tonight, people pleasing could be a trauma response.
Mm-hmm.
I immediately thought about pastors and preachers, immediately thought about public figures who suffer from this and don't even know that they're suffering from it. And it causes so much anxiety in my profession. It causes so much anxiety. And I talk to pastors and preachers all the time. And they will ask questions like, before you decided to do this, did you see if the church would be all right with it? Huh? I was like, nah, that might have been a trauma I must have had some years ago, but I must have been got over that trauma. And I could hear the people pleasing, like they need the congregation permission to live their lives and to do things that they like doing, to buy stuff that they like buying. Did you think about how the church, did you ask them? Did you ask the stewards? I don't ask them nothing. It's my life. I ain't got but one life to live. And I ain't thinking about nobody else when I'm trying to live my one life. The members ain't asking us when they get ready to do their thing. They ain't asking us, what would a pastor feel? And so how many of us are living in vacuums tonight because we worried about how other people would feel about a decision that we make, mm-hmm. or about a move that we would make? And I think that syndrome is heavy. And I'm preaching about Hannah on Sunday with this whole from trauma to triumph. And Penina messed that woman up. Mm-hmm. She messed her up royally. Who was supposed to be another sister, should have been encouraging her when her womb was barren, should have been encouraging her, but it was so much insecurity and jealous on Penina's part. I'm not going to preach it tonight, but she caused so much trauma on another sister's life, man, that it became physical, it became mental, emotional, and it was spiritual, mm-hmm. until Hannah finally moved from there to triumph. And so my last is 8 o'clock. How do we move out of that people-pleasing syndrome? That may be a response to trauma, if you can help us in 1 minute or two.
So a lot of people, I want you to recognize if there's a trauma associated to it. If there's a trauma associated to it, if it is, where did it come from? Did it come from growing up, things were never good enough, so now, and you were verbally abused often, and it shows up when you interact with people? Have you been in a relationship with someone where you just was this horrible person a lot of times, and is that shown? I want you to figure out, is the people pleasing associated to a trauma first, right? Once you figure that part out, that's where, to me, that narrative therapy comes in, because then we need to change kind of how you think about yourself, because it sounds like you may have adopted that I mess up, right? Or I have to do all these things to make others happy with me. So I want you to pay attention to that. Are you doing things to make others happy with you, when in reality, no one's going to always be happy with you and everything you do, right? And so kind of being able to free yourself from that. So sit down and think about it, and then ask yourself why you may do that. Why is that coming up? What can you change about it, right? You're never going to make everyone happy. And I've seen people go over and beyond to try to, and you're just not always going to do it. And that's okay.
That's right.
And being okay with that.
Well, thank you so much. Our time is well spent tonight, you all. What a wonderful gift Sister Goodwin is to not only the body of Christ, but to the clinical world itself, to mental health. And even as you heard her talk about her role as it relates to bullying and school and helping our children as well. Her mother worked in the school system as well, and I think still probably works in the school system. And so she picked that up from home, from her roots, and continue with that. So you know the tree by its fruit, and so we see the good fruit tonight. And so we're appreciative of her upbringing, and she has not, she's still at church. She still comes to worship. Now, I don't want y'all going bombarding her, because that's a spiritual time. She's coming to worship to have her time of worship, and then sometimes people come in with clinical stuff That ain't clinical time, y'all. That's her peace. That's her time of worship. So let's respect that when you see her in the church, whether it's Newark or South Orange. Hey, know that I love y'all and I'm mighty excited to be your pastor. Thank you for embracing the creativity. I know we can study the Bible and from cover to cover, but some things the Bible don't do what she did tonight. I'm telling you, it brings stuff to life, what we're dealing with. And so I'm going to read my book, The Body Keeps the Score, so that I can sound intelligent on Sunday morning, like I know what I'm talking about it because I read it, and I'm just about through with my grandmother's hands. So I'm working my way through that. So I'm having a good time at this, having a good time. Hey, I love y'all. Have a great night. As Cecilia Bryant said to us last month, kingdom rest, kingdom rest. I want your bodies to be able to rest tonight, your minds to be able to rest, your spirits to be able to rest, so that you be rejuvenated for whatever you have to confront on tomorrow. I'll see y'all on Sunday. Wear your favorite college gear. Let's have a good time celebrating higher learning institutions. May the Lord bless you and may the Lord keep you all tonight. Love y'all. Have a great night. God bless you. Thank you, Sister Goodwin.